Hey guys, tonight we drift far, far back. So far that time itself feels like a deep ocean you can wade into. You're not standing on any familiar ground. In fact, there is no ground you'd recognize at all. The earth beneath your feet is raw and restless, belching steam like a giant with indigestion. The air smells like rotten eggs mixed with a campfire, the kind of scent that makes you wonder if you accidentally walked into a barbecue gone horribly wrong. And the sea, well, it's not exactly the turquoise vacation getaway you might picture. It's thick, murky, bubbling with strange chemistry. Honestly, if you dipped a toe in, it would probably just dissolve into soup. You definitely wouldn't survive here. Let's just say sunscreen isn't going to cut it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love knowing when and where these journeys find you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle closer to the shore of this primordial sea. Waves lap sluggishly, not with the playful crash you'd hear at a beach today, but with the heavy slosh of a pot of stew boiling over. The water is dense with minerals, iron, nickel, sulfur, an entire pantry of elements just waiting for a recipe. You lean over and catch a faint shimmer beneath the surface, not fish or kelp, but molecules colliding, breaking apart, and reforming. Like an endless fireworks show at the molecular level, lightning cracks across the sky, not once, not twice, but so constantly you wonder if the heavens are holding a rave. Every flash injects raw energy into the soup, coaxing carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen atoms into new partnerships. You don't hear words, of course, but you can almost imagine the atoms whispering, "Let's try something new." This is where the story begins, not with grand creatures or lush forests, but with sparks dancing across a messy broth. You watch as simple molecules clump into amino acids, the Lego bricks of life. It's a slow process, painfully slow, and yet inevitable. With every bolt of lightning, with every volcanic belch of gas, the ingredients of life gain confidence, practicing the same dance again and again until something new emerges. You take a breath, not that there's much oxygen to inhale, and glance around. The atmosphere is a cocktail of methane and carbon dioxide, thick enough to choke any modern lungs. But you don't need to breathe here. You're just a visitor, a ghost wandering through deep time. It's oddly liberating. If you squint, you notice tiny puddles forming at the edges of the sea, warmed by volcanic heat. These little ponds are like miniature laboratories, concentrating molecules into tighter spaces. Imagine baking cookies, but instead of flour and sugar, your ingredients are amino acids and lipids, and the oven is fueled by magma. Not exactly a bake-off you'd want to judge, but give it time. These batches will become something far stranger than chocolate chip. Here's a fun fact. Some scientists believe clay minerals on the seafloor acted like nature's first Petri dishes, providing sticky surfaces where molecules could arrange themselves. Picture wet Play-Doh, but instead of making snakes and worms, it accidentally made the scaffolding for proteins. It's almost comical, the idea that life might owe its existence to cosmic mud pies. And yet, not everyone agrees. Historians of science, biologists, geologists, they all still debate whether life began in shallow, sunlit ponds or in the crushing dark of hydrothermal vents. Maybe the answer is both. Or maybe life had multiple false starts, like a kid trying to ride a bike, wobbling, falling, and climbing back up, until finally something stuck. As you wander along this shoreline of deep time, you notice how everything feels. Potential. The Earth hasn't decided yet what it wants to be. It could just as easily remain a sterile rock spinning in space, cold and empty. But here, in this bubbling chaos, the dice are rolling. You kneel by the water and listen closely. If you concentrate, you can almost hear the fizz and crackle of reactions. The sound reminds you of soda poured over ice, that faint hiss of carbon dioxide escaping. But here, the bubbles might carry the first whispers of RNA. The thought is dizzying. Every poem, every city, every laugh, every late-night snack you've ever had, all of it traces back to this fizzing brew. There's humor in it, too. Imagine explaining to a future civilization that their ancestors came from a puddle. No royal bloodlines, no epic creation myths, just a cosmic recipe where the instructions read, add lightning to mud, stir for a few million years. You'd probably get laughed out of the village square, but the puddle doesn't care. It's too busy inventing life. And while you're standing there, you realize something important. The story of life isn't about perfection from the start. It's about persistence. The ocean doesn't conjure a fully formed cell overnight. It tries, it fails, it tries again. Molecules fall apart, recombine, and collapse once more. 1,000 failures for every fragile success. It's messy, clumsy, and yet unstoppable. The funny thing? Even now, with all our labs and supercomputers, we still don't know exactly how it happened. Some argue it was chemistry alone, inevitable once the ingredients and conditions aligned. Others whisper that perhaps something cosmic nudged the dice, an asteroid carrying exotic molecules, a sprinkle of stardust seeding the broth. The debates rage on, but standing here, you feel the mystery more than the answer. The wind shifts, carrying the tang of sulfur across your senses. It's harsh, acrid, and yet strangely familiar, like the smell of matches after you blow them out. Your skin prickles. You know, deep down, that this atmosphere could kill you in seconds. But in the strangest twist, that same deadly mix is also a cradle, nurturing the fragile beginnings of life. You step back, toes sinking into the soggy edge of the primordial shore. The world hums with an energy you can't see but can feel, like static before a storm, like anticipation before a song begins. It's not life yet, not in the way you'd recognize, but it's on the brink. And so, you linger here, watching the invisible gears turn, waiting for the spark that will change everything. The night stretches endless, but time is no barrier. For you, it's a single evening story. For Earth, it's millions of years of patience. And somewhere, in the hidden folds of this ocean, the first whispers of biology prepare to rise. You don't really notice the moment when random soup begins turning into something more. But here you are, crouched on the shoreline of time, watching sparks of order flicker like shy fireflies. The ocean has been busy. It's not content with just tossing amino acids around like confetti. No, something new is stirring. Molecules are starting to link arms, forming longer chains, twisting into shapes that almost feel purposeful. You lean closer, and suddenly the bubbling doesn't just sound like soda fizz. It sounds like murmuring, as though the sea itself is rehearsing its first words. Imagine you're at a chaotic party where nobody knows each other. At first, everyone just mills around awkwardly, holding their drinks, bumping shoulders. But then, two strangers lock eyes, they laugh, and suddenly they're friends. Multiply that moment by billions of molecules, and you've got the beginnings of protocells. Little droplets that aren't quite alive, but behave suspiciously like they want to be. These droplets, sometimes surrounded by fragile lipid membranes, drift together and apart like shy dancers. They trap bits of RNA-like chains inside, experimenting with ways to copy themselves. The funny part? Most of these little wannabe cells are disasters. They pop, dissolve, collapse, like badly made soap bubbles. But a few linger, a few survive just a moment longer. And in this cosmic talent show, sometimes longer is all you need to start winning. Here's the wild, lesser-known truth. Clay might have been the secret host of this whole performance. Yes, mud. Ordinary clay particles spread across shallow ponds may have offered the perfect sticky surfaces where molecules lined up neatly, like kids arranging dominoes. Imagine the universe's first science fair project being scribbled in wet dirt. You crouch down and run your fingers through the sediment, and you can almost feel the invisible patterns trying to emerge. But not everyone buys the clay story. Some scholars argue that life began instead in the crushing dark of hydrothermal vents at the seafloor, where scalding mineral-rich water gushes out like dragon breath. There, molecules could have sheltered in tiny rock pores, safe from the chaos above. Others say maybe it was both. Life trying multiple recipes until one finally tasted right. Even now, the arguments ripple through conferences and papers, and no one has nailed down a clear answer. You smile at the thought, billions of years later, and we're still debating puddles versus vents. The night air here feels thick, heavy with methane and carbon dioxide. You know it would smother you instantly if you were really breathing it. But in this dreamlike drift through history, you're untouchable. You can wander through poison skies without fear. In fact, the danger only makes the scene more magical, like standing in the middle of a lightning storm, where each flash births another possibility. Speaking of lightning, it never seems to stop. Bolts split the sky again, stabbing the sea, pouring raw energy into the broth. You flinch instinctively, but no harm comes. The glow reflects off the water, illuminating countless tiny shimmering beads. Each droplet contains a miniature experiment in persistence, and in those experiments, chance becomes direction. You notice one cluster of protocells drifting together, colliding, breaking apart, and regrouping. They're not alive, not yet, but the way they cling makes you think of magnets, or maybe like awkward teenagers at a school dance, bumping into each other, unsure what to do with their new energy. There's something endearing about it, almost comical, like watching the first rehearsal of a play that doesn't know it's destined to run for billions of years. The ocean sighs, sending a ripple across the shore where you stand. You glance up, and the stars above shimmer faintly through the haze. Somewhere out there, countless worlds spin silently, some barren, some fertile. You wonder, did the same dance happen elsewhere, in other soups under alien skies? Or is this little muddy shoreline the only place in the cosmos where molecules decided to dream of life? There's a tenderness to the thought that out of all the chaos in the universe, this planet's chemistry chose to write stories, paint art, build cathedrals, launch rockets, all from a puddle that refused to stay a puddle. But not everything is poetic. You know, the majority of these early attempts will fail. Protocells are fragile things. A shift in temperature, a stray wave, even a gust of toxic gas can wipe out thousands of microscopic experiments. It's like the Earth is holding auditions, and most applicants don't make the cut. Still, the auditions never stop. Over and over, the process repeats. A relentless perseverance that would make any motivational speaker blush. You kneel again, pressing your palm against the damp earth. It feels warm, alive almost. And for a fleeting moment, you sense the weight of inevitability. Life doesn't just happen here by accident. It feels fated, as if the planet itself refuses to remain silent. Somewhere nearby, a protocell elongates, wiggles, and divides clumsily into two. It's not true replication yet, more like an accident of physics. But you feel a thrill watching it happen. You're witnessing the planet's first rehearsal of reproduction, shaky and awkward, like a toddler's first steps. You almost want to clap, whisper, "You've got this, little one." The scholars of today argue endlessly about whether it was RNA that came first, chains of information guiding the dance, or whether metabolism itself, the flow of energy, was the real pioneer. Was life information-driven or energy-driven? The debates are like a tug of war across deep time, and nobody has fully won. But here, in the hush of this ancient night, the question feels irrelevant. You can see both happening at once, information trying to stabilize, energy forcing its way through reactions. The beauty lies in the uncertainty. The sea laps gently, and you realize hours, maybe centuries, have passed while you've stood here. Time has a strange elasticity in these early ages. What feels like minutes to you could be 1,000,000 years in the making. The Earth doesn't rush. It never has. And so, you settle back on your heels, listening to the bubbling, the fizzing, the whispers of molecules rehearsing their lines. The stage is set, the actors are learning their roles, and though the curtain hasn't fully risen, the play has already begun. You smile because you know what's coming. These fragile protocells, clumsy and shy, are about to change the world in ways no one could have predicted. And you, dear traveler, get a front row seat to the greatest drama Earth will ever stage. You wake, or maybe you never slept, because here time is slippery, like a dream you can't quite hold. The bubbling ponds of chemistry have shifted. The fragile droplets, those protocells, have stumbled through enough mistakes to finally cross a line. Now, they aren't just accidents anymore. They're alive. You don't see them with your eyes, not really. They're too small, far smaller than a speck of dust caught in sunlight. But if you close your eyes and let yourself feel, you sense the hum of activity. It's as if the entire ocean has developed a heartbeat. Billions of microscopic pioneers now drift, multiply, divide, and explore the watery world, oblivious to the fact that they've just invented survival. The air still reeks of methane, carbon dioxide, and sulfur. No oxygen here, not yet. That would be as poisonous as cyanide to these little champions. Instead, they thrive in the thick, choking gases, feasting on simple molecules dissolved in the water. They are anaerobes, life forms that don't just tolerate the absence of oxygen, but demand it. To them, oxygen is the monster hiding in the closet. You crouch at the edge of the sea, watching invisible armies swirl. It's quiet, too quiet, until you remember. If you could shrink yourself down, you'd hear the snap and crackle of chemical reactions firing off like microscopic fireworks. It would sound almost like the static hum of an old TV left on at midnight. Here's something odd. Some of these microbes don't even bother with sunlight. They survive by using sulfur or iron or hydrogen as their energy source. Imagine a world where instead of photosynthesis, we had sulfur synthesis. Dinner here tastes like rotten eggs, but for these pioneers, it's a banquet. And they multiply with an enthusiasm that would put rabbits to shame. The ocean becomes their empire. You watch as mats of bacteria spread across shallow seafloors, forming slippery carpets. If you were reckless enough to step barefoot here, you'd sink into a slimy mess that squishes between your toes like an ancient waterbed. It's disgusting and beautiful, because these mats are the first ecosystems. The well-known story is that Earth began with simple bacteria. But here's a little stranger truth. These bacteria weren't primitive in attitude. They were innovators. They experimented constantly, swapping genes, mutating wildly, trying out new tricks like a cosmic version of trial and error cooking. If one group failed, another picked up where they left off. Life was already stubborn, already relentless. And of course, scientists argue. Some say anaerobes spread globally, filling every corner of the ocean. Others claim they thrived only in isolated oases, clinging to volcanic vents or warm lagoons. The fossil record is too faint to decide. It's like trying to reconstruct a movie when all you've got left is a single blurry frame. The debate rumbles on, but in the hush of this ancient sea, you can almost hear the confidence of the microbes themselves. They don't care about scholarly arguments. They're too busy multiplying. You lean closer, and something unexpected brushes your imagination. These microbes are invisible to the eye, yes, but if you could smell them, the stench would be unbearable. Think of a room full of hard-boiled eggs left out for a week, multiplied by 1,000. You wrinkle your nose, grateful you're only a ghost here. Still, you laugh a little. Imagine telling someone in the future, yes, the first thriving creatures on Earth smelled like a sewer. Not exactly a majestic origin story. But life rarely starts pretty. It starts functional. These microbes are masters at making do. They can squeeze energy out of the harshest chemistry, cling to surfaces, and reproduce endlessly. For hundreds of millions of years, they rule without challenge. The oceans are theirs. The land, barren and hostile, waits silently while these tiny pioneers play out their slow domination. And the thing is, this world suits them perfectly. No oxygen to burn their fragile bodies, no predators to gobble them up. Just endless space and endless time. They are kings, emperors, gods of a planet that doesn't yet know what it means to breathe. You dip your hand into the water, feel it warm against your skin. The ocean here is like a living soup, thick with cells. Every droplet you lift between your fingers contains millions of tiny lives, all floating, dividing, humming along. It feels sacred, almost holy, yet also crowded. Something in the back of your mind whispers that this monopoly can't last forever. You sit back, watching. Lightning still flashes in the distance. Volcanoes still cough smoke. But the real drama is unfolding at the smallest scale. This is Act 2 of Earth's story. And though it looks uneventful from above, the stage is packed with restless performers. They don't know it yet, but their reign will be challenged. A new arrival is on the horizon. One that will bring both creation and catastrophe. For now, though, you let them have their moment. The anaerobes, invisible yet mighty, coating the world in slime, exhaling gases that shape the sky. They think they've secured eternity. You smile softly because you know the twist that's coming, and just as you're about to leave the shore, the sea whispers again. Not in words, but in a rhythm, steady, patient, ancient. The heartbeat of microbes, the pulse of persistence. You lean in, listening, lulled by the quiet certainty of their rule. For millions of years, nothing will disturb them. Nothing. Until the day something small and green-blue appears, ready to change everything. The ocean has been quiet for too long, too stable, too predictable. That's usually when something unexpected sneaks in. At first, it doesn't look like much. Just another microscopic squiggle drifting with the currents. A cousin of the others, really. But this one carries a secret. A trick so revolutionary, so dangerous, that it will rewrite the planet itself. These newcomers are cyanobacteria. And their weapon? Photosynthesis. Not the ordinary kind some microbes already do, feasting on sulfur or iron. No. This is the bold, solar-powered version. These tiny inventors learn how to use sunlight directly, pulling carbon dioxide from the air and water, and, here's the shocking part, releasing oxygen as waste. Oxygen, the poison, the killer, the monster under the bed. To the reigning anaerobes, it's as if someone has spiked their perfect sulfur-scented paradise with cyanide gas. They can't breathe it. They can't survive it. Oxygen corrodes, burns, and destroys their delicate chemistry. And yet, cyanobacteria pump it out relentlessly, bubble by bubble, like a silent revolution. You lean closer, peering into the water. Cyanobacteria don't just drift aimlessly. They gather in colonies, clinging together in mats and layers, building strange rocky structures known as stromatolites. Imagine stone-like mounds, but alive. Layer after layer of slimy green film stacking up, baking under the sun, exhaling oxygen like tiny factories. If you were standing here billions of years ago, the shorelines would look alien. Shallow bays studded with lumpy, knobby formations, slick with greenish slime. Not pretty, not majestic, but these stromatolites are monuments, the first visible cities of life, sprawling across tidal flats like ancient suburbs. The air begins to change, slowly, painfully slowly. It takes millions of years, but oxygen seeps out of the seas, molecule by molecule, and starts to creep into the atmosphere. You can almost hear the anaerobes panicking, retreating into oxygen-free corners of the world. Deep mud, volcanic vents, caves, underground pockets. Their empire is collapsing, undone by an invisible tide. Scientists call this upheaval the Great Oxidation Event. Sounds dramatic, right? And it is. It's mass extinction on a microscopic scale, a holocaust for anaerobes. But at the same time, it's creation. Because oxygen, for all its violence, is a game changer. It makes energy easier to harvest. It opens doors to complexity. It sets the stage for everything we recognize as life. Still, standing here, you can't shake the unease. You breathe in and cough, though it's only your imagination. The first breaths of oxygen are harsh, metallic, like rust forming in your lungs. This isn't the clean, refreshing air you know. It's thin, patchy, toxic to most who live here. And yet, the cyanobacteria thrive. Day after day, sun after sun, they churn out more oxygen. They don't know they're villains or heroes. They're just doing what they do best. Eat light, grow, multiply. The world begins to rust. Literally. Oxygen bonds with iron dissolved in seawater, raining down as layers of red sediment onto the ocean floor. Billions of tons of iron turn to rust, piling up as massive banded iron formations, striped rocks that future geologists will dig up and marvel at. You watch the seas shift color from dark greenish to something clearer, bluer. Slowly the water sheds its ancient haze. And the sky? That's changing too. The thick, suffocating shroud of methane begins to thin. Oxygen pushes in, tearing at the old greenhouse blanket. The planet cools. The first whispers of ice creep across the land. Cyanobacteria, without knowing it, may have triggered Earth's earliest snowball episodes. Global freezes where even the tropics turn white. Imagine a world smothered in glaciers, all because of microscopic architects. You crouch by the stromatolites, brushing your fingers over their slimy surface. They squish unpleasantly, alive yet alien. Inside, countless cyanobacteria hum in unison, little engines of transformation. They don't know it, but they are terraforming the planet, sculpting the sky for creatures that don't exist yet. The anaerobes are furious, but powerless. For every patch they retreat to, the oxygen tide follows. You can almost hear their silent screams in the deep, a chorus of extinction echoing in the dark. And yet, without this catastrophe, without this ruthless purge, the path ahead would never open. The irony is sharp. Life's first global disaster isn't caused by an asteroid, a supervolcano, or a cosmic accident. It's caused by life itself. Tiny, stubborn, light-hungry microbes altering the chemistry of an entire planet. You stand back and watch the sky flicker with change. The sun sets through a thinner haze now, bleeding orange into a horizon that's slowly becoming blue. Somewhere, deep in your chest, you feel the air shift, even if you can't yet breathe it. This is the moment, the turning point. A world poisoned for some, but prepared for others. The oxygen revolution has begun, and nothing will ever be the same again. The change is subtle at first, barely noticeable, like when the AC in your room suddenly clicks on, and you only realize it when goosebumps race across your skin. The cyanobacteria keep churning, relentless little solar panels. Oxygen keeps creeping upward, slowly breaking down the thick blanket of methane that has kept the planet warm and cozy. And without that insulating haze, Earth begins to shiver. Picture the tropics. You're standing on the edge of a shallow sea, watching stromatolites do their slimy business, when the water around your ankles feels just a little too cold for comfort. Days shorten, nights stretch longer, and frost, real frost, begins to creep into places it was never meant to be. One winter isn't the problem, not even 10. But oxygen doesn't stop. Methane keeps falling apart, and Earth tips into one of the strangest, most terrifying episodes in its history. A snowball Earth. Glaciers spread from the poles, but they don't stop there. They crawl further, swallowing valleys, coasts, even equatorial zones. Imagine sand dunes replaced with ice ridges, palm tree beaches buried under white silence. Ocean surfaces freeze, locking away life beneath thick caps of ice. From orbit, the planet would look like a giant marble, white, frozen, almost lifeless. And here's the kicker. Scientists are still debating just how frozen things got. Some argue Earth was completely sealed in ice, from pole to pole, a total snowball. Others think maybe it was more of a slush ball, with some patches of open water hanging on like stubborn puddles in a winter storm. Either way, for the creatures alive at the time, it was catastrophic. You press your hand to the ice and hear the faint, muffled crackle of microbial life trapped underneath. Cyanobacteria, those overachievers, find pockets where light still penetrates. Thin patches of ice, cracks, or maybe even liquid brine beneath the frozen crust. They keep photosynthesizing, stubborn as ever. They don't care that they triggered the crisis. They just keep making oxygen. And deep underground, in volcanic vents and oxygen-free caves, the anaerobes cling to survival like exiled kings in the shadows. The Earth has split in two, an upper world ruled by oxygen and ice, and a hidden underworld where the old ways refuse to die. The irony isn't lost on you. Life has frozen itself. Cyanobacteria, in their effort to harness sunlight, have plunged the entire globe into an icy tomb. Talk about an overreaction. It's like installing solar panels on your house and accidentally knocking out power for the whole neighborhood. Still, not everything is doomed. Volcanoes belch carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, a slow counterbalance to the cooling. For millions of years, ice reigns and life tiptoes along the edge of extinction. But volcanoes never stop breathing. Eventually, their constant exhalations rebuild the greenhouse effect. You imagine the thaw, ice sheets cracking, shattering, retreating like wounded giants. Torrents of meltwater flood into the seas. The world shifts from frozen silence to roaring chaos. The climate slams from cold to hot in geologic whiplash. And through it all, cyanobacteria endure, flexible, patient, tireless. In the end, the Great Freeze isn't just a disaster. It's a stress test. Life that survives becomes tougher, smarter, more adaptable. The stage is being set for something bigger, though the players don't realize it yet. And you, standing there in your heavy prehistoric parka, don't worry, I gave you one. Watch the first great environmental crisis of Earth's history fade away, leaving behind scars etched in stone, glacial grooves carved into ancient bedrock, layers of rock dusted with chemical fingerprints of a frozen ocean, silent testimonies of a planet that nearly suffocated in its own breath. But it didn't. Life bent, but it didn't break. And in that resilience lies the promise of everything still to come. The thaw doesn't happen with a gentle spring breeze. No, Earth wakes from its icy coma with the violence of a cracked shell. Picture glaciers fracturing with thunderous booms. Shards of ice the size of skyscrapers collapsing into newly freed oceans. Meltwater rivers gush, carving deep channels across the barren land, erasing entire landscapes in days. You walk along the coast, though coast feels like a generous term, when the shoreline itself is still rearranging under your feet. The ice withdraws like a wounded animal, leaving behind scoured rock, polished smooth by centuries of grinding. Piles of boulders sit like forgotten toys, dropped by glaciers in their retreat. The world is raw, scarred, but alive. And under the chaos, cyanobacteria never stopped. They lingered beneath the ice sheets, clinging to cracks where sunlight trickled through. They waited in briny puddles, surviving in the chemical shadows. Now, with the ice receding, they surge back into the open seas. Like marathoners stumbling into daylight after an underground race, they stretch, expand, and reclaim the oceans with a vengeance. The oxygen revolution kicks into high gear. With more open water and stronger sunlight, photosynthesis spreads faster, pumping oxygen into the atmosphere like an unstoppable tide. You tilt your head back, noticing the skies aren't that murky orange-brown anymore. They're bluer, clearer, fresher, though still far too thin for you to breathe without a spacesuit. And the seas? Oh, the seas are changing. With iron mostly rusted out and sunk to the seafloor during earlier oxygen surges, the waters become clearer, more transparent. Sunlight pierces deeper, creating more habitats for photosynthesizers. Cyanobacteria mat colonies flourish, sprawling like neon green carpets across shallow seas, extending their slimy empire further than ever before. For anaerobes, though, recovery is a nightmare. Their once vast domains are shrinking into isolated corners, swampy muds, volcanic vents, underground fissures. They're like old aristocrats in exile, clinging to fading relevance while cyanobacteria and their oxygen-loving descendants expand. Here's where things get juicy. Oxygen doesn't just poison, it liberates. With oxygen, life can squeeze far more energy from food. Imagine trading in a rickety bicycle for a turbocharged engine. Suddenly, organisms can afford complexity. They can build bigger bodies, run more elaborate chemistry, and, eventually, branch into entirely new forms of existence. But there's another twist. Oxygen in the upper atmosphere reacts under sunlight, forming a thin protective veil, the ozone layer. You glance upward and realize it's like Earth has installed its first cosmic sunscreen. Without it, ultraviolet radiation from the sun blasted the surface mercilessly. With it, life begins to consider venturing closer to the edges of land, maybe even above the tide pools. Not yet, but the door is cracked open. You bend down and scoop up a handful of stromatolite slime. It squishes between your fingers, alive with 1 trillion tiny workers. Slimy, smelly, resilient. These mats are history's unsung architects, and now they are empire builders. Scientists still debate just how quickly recovery happened. Was it a slow crawl, microbes cautiously repopulating the seas? Or was it an explosion, a sudden green tide surging into every corner, freed from the ice? No one's sure, but what's clear is this. Cyanobacteria weren't just survivors, they were victors. Their persistence rewrote the rules of survival. And you, trudging barefoot along the newborn coast, can almost feel the earth inhaling for the first time. The world is bruised but breathing, scarred but stronger. Every puddle, every bay, every tide pool is alive with possibilities, shimmering with sunlight and bubbling with oxygen. It's the dawn after a long, icy night. And the players of life are stepping back onto the stage, changed, hardened, and ready for the next act. You lean over the tide pool, expecting the same old squishy mats of cyanobacteria. And yes, they're still there, bubbling away like tireless little baristas pumping oxygen shots into the world. But something else stirs beneath the surface. Larger, slower, more deliberate. Not just strings of bacteria anymore. Something with ambition. This is the rise of the eukaryotes. Now, don't panic. It's not like you suddenly find jellyfish or seaweed waving at you. No, the change is subtler, microscopic. But compared to bacteria, eukaryotes are like luxury condos compared to studio apartments. Inside their cells, the chaos is organized. There's a nucleus to store DNA, little compartments for different jobs, and, most importantly, mitochondria. Mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. You've heard the meme, but here, it's not a joke. This was a partnership born of desperation and luck. Once upon a time, an early eukaryote swallowed a bacterium instead of digesting it, and the two struck a deal. You give me energy, I give you protection. That swallowed bacterium evolved into mitochondria, turning oxygen from a toxin into an energy jackpot. It's like strapping a nuclear reactor into your body while your neighbors still burn wood. Suddenly, eukaryotes could do things no simple bacterium could dream of: grow bigger, build stronger, store more. You squat at the water's edge, watching them drift like tiny stars. Most are single-celled still, but they move differently, stretching pseudopodia, sweeping with cilia, gliding with grace. They aren't just surviving, they're experimenting. Each new generation is a roll of the dice, and some of those dice land on wild innovations. Meanwhile, cyanobacteria keep spreading oxygen, unknowingly feeding the rise of their successors. What began as poison has now become fuel. The world has tilted. The age of microbes isn't over, but a new hierarchy is emerging. Here's a fun, unsettling fact. Some eukaryotes didn't just partner with bacteria. They swallowed cyanobacteria too. Those became chloroplasts, tiny green factories inside plant-like cells, which means photosynthesis wasn't invented just once, but borrowed and repurposed. That's right. The ancestors of plants were basically microbial thieves, stealing the cyanobacteria's tricks and locking them inside their own walls. And it worked brilliantly. Eukaryotes grew diverse, bold. Some became predators, chasing down smaller prey. Others became floating gardens, harvesting sunlight. Some even dabbled in multicellularity, clumping together like teenagers forming bands. Messy at first, but with potential. Scientists still argue about the exact timing. Did eukaryotes emerge before the great oxygen surge, lying low until the world was ready? Or did they arise after, seizing the new opportunities oxygen unlocked? The fossils are whisper-thin, and the debate rages on. But whether they were patient schemers or opportunistic upstarts, one thing is clear: eukaryotes are here to stay. You grin, realizing what this means. Complexity has entered the game. Until now, Earth's life was simple, flat, small, microscopic. But with eukaryotes, evolution gets tools sharp enough to carve out entire kingdoms of future possibility. Of course, if you asked a stromatolite back then, it would probably burble something like, "Big deal, I've been here for 2 billion years." But you and I know better. This is the start of everything that looks remotely familiar to us. Plants, animals, fungi. The blueprint begins here. You dip your hand in the water and imagine those invisible eukaryotes brushing past your skin. Pioneers of complexity, architects of tomorrow. You don't see them, but they're watching you too, in a way. The tide is shifting. The age of simple microbes is ending, and you're standing right at the shoreline of something vast, something strange, something destined to change the world all over again. The air tastes different now. Well, if you could actually taste it without a sci-fi oxygen mask. It's still far too thin for your lungs, but compared to the choking haze of methane and carbon dioxide from earlier ages, this atmosphere feels almost civilized. Cyanobacteria have been at it for hundreds of millions of years, and their oxygen is finally filling more than just shallow seas. You tilt your head back and notice the sky. It's no longer a murky soup, but a canvas shifting toward a deeper blue. Oxygen, fragile and invisible, is sculpting the heavens. And up high, in the thin edge where atmosphere kisses space, sunlight is striking oxygen molecules and knitting them together into a new guardian: ozone. The ozone layer isn't dramatic to look at, but it's the planet's first parasol. Without it, the sun's ultraviolet light scalded Earth's surface like an unfiltered tanning bed. With it, radiation eases, shadows soften, and for the first time, the surface becomes a little less hostile. Someday, life will wander onto land thanks to this shield. But for now, the seas remain the cradle. Underwater, you watch as conditions stabilize. Oxygen seeps into deeper currents, spreading like a dye through fabric. At first, it reacts violently, rusting iron, oxidizing minerals, scrubbing the oceans clean. Once the great rusting slows, the waters turn clearer, more open, almost inviting. Sunlight penetrates deeper, and with it, photosynthesizers flourish like neon carpets across continental shelves. This new atmosphere isn't just chemistry, it's opportunity. Oxygen allows organisms to extract 10, 20 times more energy from food than before. That's not just a diet upgrade, it's a revolution. Imagine running your body on a single AA battery versus plugging into a high-voltage grid. Suddenly, life can afford luxuries, bigger bodies, longer lifespans, more elaborate cellular machinery. And with opportunity comes ambition. Single-celled eukaryotes stretch boundaries. Some become hunters, stalking their neighbors in microscopic dramas of chase and gulp. Others grow photosynthetic, transforming sunlight inside stolen cyanobacteria. Your future chloroplasts at work. Multicellularity experiments pop up like garage startups, some failing instantly, others sticking around just long enough to hint at what's possible. Still, nothing about this world feels inevitable. You crouch by a tidal flat, squinting at stromatolites. They're still here, stubborn as ever, their slimy layers bubbling in rhythm with the sun. They must look at the newcomers, the flashy eukaryotes, the oxygen lovers, and think, sure, you're trendy now, but let's see you last 3 billion years. And honestly, they have a point. Scientists debate how steady this oxygen rise really was. Was it a slow climb, like filling a balloon one careful breath at a time? Or were there sudden surges, atmosphere flipping between breathable and suffocating like a light switch? The rocks don't give away their secrets easily, and historians of Earth's early air are still puzzling over the clues. But you don't need a lab notebook to feel it. You close your eyes and imagine the wind, thin, metallic, cool, rushing past your cheeks. The planet itself is changing character. From an alien world of gases hostile to you, it's edging towards something that, in another few billion years, your lungs could call home. For now, you can only stand here on the shore of time, sensing the deepening breath of Earth. Cyanobacteria are still singing their ancient solar song, eukaryotes are learning new tricks, and the atmosphere above is thickening into a shield. The stage lights are warming. The curtain hasn't lifted yet, but the play is about to expand in scale, in spectacle, in stakes. And you, lucky dreamer, are watching from the front row. You've seen revolutions before in this story, tiny cells inventing wild tricks, the seas freezing over, the skies shifting color. But this next turn isn't just a change, it's a massacre. The oxygen that now perfumes the air may feel like progress to you. To most of the creatures alive at this time, though, it's a death sentence. Anaerobic life, the original rulers of Earth, find themselves choking in their own kingdom. Oxygen seeps into every corner, even the muck and shadows they once claimed as safe havens. Imagine waking up to discover your apartment filling slowly with bleach gas, and every door you open just lets more in. You kneel beside a tide pool, and you can almost hear the silence where once there were teeming bacterial empires. Their colonies are collapsing, their metabolisms unraveling. Some try to adapt, mutating desperate defenses. A few succeed in carving out niche refugees, but most vanish, extinguished without ceremony. This is one of the earliest known mass extinctions, life killing life, not with claws or fangs, but with invisible chemistry. The rocks themselves bear witness. Oxygen rusts the seas, binding with iron and dropping it out as colossal banded iron formations. Imagine entire oceans bleeding out, leaving behind layered red stone. These stripes, still visible in cliffs today, are the fossilized fingerprints of catastrophe. But oxygen isn't done causing trouble. It doesn't just kill anaerobes, it reshapes the climate too. With methane scrubbed from the atmosphere and greenhouse warmth dwindling, Earth tumbles into those brutal snowball episodes again, yo-yoing between freeze and thaw. It's a double blow, suffocation for the old guard, ice for the survivors. You crouch lower, dipping your hand into icy water. It burns cold, but beneath the surface, eukaryotes drift, Tiny, daring, flexible. They're not untouched, of course. Plenty of them are swept away in the chaos. But their ability to harness oxygen flips the story. What is poison to one is power to another. Still, the irony bites deep. This wasn't an asteroid strike or a cosmic accident. This was life turning against itself. Microbes rewriting the rules, and in the process, pulling the rug out from under billions of years of dominance. You almost want to whisper, "Oops," on behalf of the cyanobacteria. But they wouldn't care. They're too busy thriving. Scientists still argue over the pace of this collapse. Was it a slow squeeze, anaerobes dying off drip by drip? Or was there a sudden tipping point when oxygen crossed a deadly threshold? The evidence is blurred by time, the debate unsolved. What's certain is that the aftermath is stark. Whole ecosystems erased, entire lineages gone without descendants. And yet, as tragic as it feels, this extinction is also a beginning. The microbial monopoly has ended. The oxygen world is harsh, unstable, unpredictable, but it opens doors no one could have imagined before. You glance at the horizon. The sky is clearer, the seas glimmer brighter, but the silence is heavy. You feel the weight of absence, whole worlds that once buzzed unseen, now gone forever. It's a reminder that progress is never free. Something always pays the price. Still, in that silence, something else stirs. Survivors, innovators, dreamers with mitochondria humming in their cores, ready to seize the space left behind. The oxygen catastrophe is over. The oxygen age has begun. And life, scarred but stubborn, is already sketching the first outlines of the future. You wander along a coastline that feels almost empty after the chaos of extinction. The air is thinner, sharper, with a tang of metal still clinging to it. The seas ripple under sunlight, their color a clearer blue now that so much iron has settled to the sea floor. But despite the silence, the world isn't barren. It still hums, softly, persistently, with life. And scattered across the shallows are strange monuments to that persistence. Stromatolites. You step closer to one, squatting low so your reflection ripples across its lumpy layered dome. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than an odd rock, but press your palm against it, and you'll feel the faint squish of slime just under the crust, a living skin breathing in sunlight. Each stromatolite is a time capsule, built layer by cyanobacteria and their allies, as if microbes decided to stack themselves into geological skyscrapers. They're not glamorous. If anything, they look like the awkward love child of a pancake stack and a coral reef. But these formations are profound, physical records of life's stubbornness. Long before there were forests, mountains of shells, or skeletons of dinosaurs, there were these slimy stone mounds holding the line for billions of years. You walk among them, imagining shallow seas dotted with these microbial suburbs. They blanket tidal flats, creating slippery mats that squelch underfoot. Fish don't exist yet to dart between them, no crabs to scuttle along their bases. Just microbial towns, quiet and industrious, producing oxygen like tiny factories and leaving behind mineralized husks as monuments to their patience. Here's the fun part. Stromatolites are still around today. Not many, but enough. In places like Shark Bay, Australia, you can find living examples that look almost identical to their ancient cousins. It's like stumbling across dinosaurs still munching leaves in your backyard. Except these survivors are slimy, unassuming, and a little smelly, and scientists still argue about them. Were stromatolites always just passive stacks of microbes, or were they bustling ecosystems with layers of different species cooperating like tenants in a high-rise? Some geologists even wonder whether waves and sediments played as much of a role in their shapes as the microbes themselves. No clear verdict. It just mystery preserved in stone. But for you, standing here, the impression is simple. Stromatolites are monuments. Microbial obelisks carved not by chisels, but by patience. They remind you that evolution isn't just about drama and catastrophe. Sometimes it's about persistence, the quiet hum of millions of cells doing the same thing day after day, century after century, until their legacy towers above the sand. You run your fingers across one stromatolite's surface. It's slimy, yes, but beneath that sheen lies history written in layers. One generation on top of another, reaching back into time so deep your mind can't hold it all at once. It's humbling, a little dizzying, like staring at an ancient library where the books are written in microbial breath. You stand up, brushing your hand on your thigh, and glance across the tidal flats. Stromatolites are everywhere, squatting like squat little monks, silent but eternal. They are the link between the old anaerobic world and the new oxygen age, witnesses to the deaths of empires and the births of new possibilities. And though other creatures will eventually overshadow them, plants, animals, forests, reefs, the stromatolites will always be the first monuments, the first testaments to life's ability to leave a visible mark on the planet. In their quiet way, they whisper, "We were here first, we endured, and we built the foundation for everything that follows." You kneel beside a cliff face, running your hand along the rough surface. At first, it seems like just stone, gray, immovable, silent. But look closer, and it's more than stone. It's a record, a layered diary, written not in ink or parchment, but in sediments, minerals, and the whispers of vanished seas. Each stripe, each seam, is a page. Some are faint, thin as a fingernail, marking quiet centuries when the world barely shifted. Others are thick, bold strokes, sand dumped by a raging flood, ash rained from a volcanic tantrum, or sediment stirred by sudden climate jolts. If you listen with the right kind of patience, these rocks speak of storms, extinctions, and long stretches of eerie calm. Geologists call this stratigraphy, but you might call it storytelling by stone. You trace one layer that gleams faintly red. That's iron oxide, rust, evidence of when oxygen first began to tinge the oceans. Another layer sparkles with tiny black grains, remnants of ancient volcanic glass. And in between, you see pale ribbons of limestone, whispering of warm, shallow seas once alive with microbial mats. It feels like reading Braille, written by the earth itself. Of course, scientists argue over these records. They debate whether a band of clay represents a global catastrophe or just a local hiccup. Was that spike in carbon isotopes caused by a burst of life, or by oceans suffocating in anoxic gloom? The rocks don't explain themselves. They simply exist, waiting for interpretation, forcing us to be both detectives and poets. You imagine a future archaeologist, millions of years from now, running their fingers along the layers that include our era. What would they see? A sudden thin smear of plastics, laced with radioactive isotopes, a faint chemical scar of petroleum and industry. Our legacy will be written in the rocks too, as undeniable as any ancient stromatolite. But for now, here in the early chapters of Earth's saga, the stones whisper of oceans rising and falling, of continents shifting like restless sleepers, of climate swinging from furnace to freezer. Each fracture, each mineral crystal, is a bookmark in time, and if you press your ear against the stone, yes, indulge in a little superstition, you might almost hear it, the slow pulse of the planet, steady as a heartbeat, echoing across eons. These rocks are not just silent witnesses, they are storytellers, patient, cryptic, unhurried. They do not care whether we understand them, but when we do, the reward is staggering. The ability to see beyond memory, beyond myth, into the raw, unembellished truth of deep time. You lean back, staring up at the cliff. To most people, it's just a wall of stone. To you, it's a library. And every page you decipher makes the past less alien, more alive. The Earth has been keeping its diary, and you are finally learning how to read it. You stand at the edge of an ancient shoreline, toes sinking into mud that hasn't seen daylight in over 1 billion years. At least, not until your imagination drags it into the present. The air is still thin, not the rich oxygen buffet you breathe now, but enough that things are stirring. You squint, and in the shallows, you spot something unexpected. Clusters of cells huddled together, whispering secrets to one another. This is no longer the solitary age of single cells floating aimlessly. No, these are the pioneers of teamwork, the first experiments in multicellularity. At first glance, they don't look like much. Think of clumps of jelly, fragile as soap bubbles, clinging to each other because sometimes it's safer not to be alone. But inside those clumps lies a revolution, cells beginning to specialize, dividing labor like roommates figuring out who cooks and who takes out the trash. Some cells take on the job of defense, toughening their walls. Others focus on reproduction, hoarding the genetic lottery tickets. The rest, poor souls, do the metabolic grunt work, breaking down sunlight, nutrients, or sulfur to keep the colony alive. It's the birth of society, microscopic addition. You chuckle. Imagine if your apartment plants decided to unionize. One leaf handling photosynthesis, another taking over pest defense, a third writing angsty leaf poetry in the corner. That's what's happening here. Only the stakes are cosmic. And why now? Because the oxygen you've been following, that restless gas pouring from cyanobacteria, is finally stable enough to support new experiments. Oxygen allows cells to burn fuel more efficiently. With that extra energy, life can afford to get bigger, riskier, stranger. Of course, historians of biology still argue about the details. Did multicellularity evolve once, or many times, in different corners of the microbial world? Was it triggered by rising oxygen, or by ecological arms races, cells eating one another until it became smarter to stick together than to stay apart? The debate rages on, and maybe it always will. Still, the fossils don't lie. Around 1.6 billion years ago, we see hints of multicellular algae. By 1.2 billion years ago, things like red algae are leaving their delicate imprints in stone. And somewhere around 800 million years ago, the tempo accelerates. The world is ripe for collaboration, and life takes the hint. You lean closer to the ancient tidal pool, the water ripples. The colonies pulse softly, almost like tiny lanterns. They're not plants, not animals, not fungi, not yet. They're the prototypes, the rough drafts, the beta versions of bodies to come. And in this dim, alien world, you realize the line between me and we is starting to blur. Once, life was a solo performance. Now, it's becoming a choir. You grin at the thought. Cooperation, it seems, wasn't invented by humans, or even ants. It was baked into life from the very beginning, written in cell walls and whispered in genetic codes. You've just stumbled into the rehearsal room of evolution's greatest symphony. The first notes are faint, almost hesitant. But oh, just wait until the orchestra warms up. You wake to a world smothered in white. The horizon has vanished. Ice stretches in every direction, glittering under a pale sun that offers little warmth. You inhale, and the air tastes thinner, sharper, as if the planet itself is holding its breath. Welcome to Snowball Earth. The oceans are locked under miles of frozen armor. Waves that once lapped gently at microbial mats are now stilled, sealed in silence. Continents wear coats of glaciers so thick that mountains bend under their weight. If Earth could shiver, this is what it would feel like. A deep freeze that lasts not a season, not a century, but millions of years. You shuffle forward, your boots crunching on frost that shouldn't even exist at the equator, and you think, how did life survive this? Scientists debate it endlessly. Some argue that cracks in the ice, thin ribbons of open water near volcanoes or hydrothermal vents, acted as refuges, Others suggest entire ecosystems thrive beneath the frozen ceiling, where geothermal heat kept pockets of liquid alive. And some whisper that maybe life learned resilience here, evolving clever strategies in the dark, like seeds biding time underground. The irony makes you laugh softly. Earth had finally gotten oxygen, finally given multicellular life a foothold, and then, bam! Someone left the cosmic freezer door open. And the strangest part? Nobody's certain what triggered it. Perhaps continents drifted in such a way that weathering sucked carbon dioxide out of the air, starving the atmosphere of its greenhouse blanket. Or maybe a burst of biological activity pulled the planet's thermostat too far toward cold. Either way, the result was catastrophic beauty. You run your gloved hand across the frozen crust of what was once a tropical sea. Somewhere below, cells are still alive, clinging to existence, enduring stresses so harsh that they will come out stronger when the thaw arrives. It's as if the planet is testing its own creations. Survive this, and you'll be ready for anything. And, oh, the thaw will come. Volcanoes, those relentless pressure cookers, keep belching carbon dioxide into the air. With time, the greenhouse effect builds, and the ice begins to crack, melt, and retreat. When the world finally wakes from its icy coma, oceans surge back to life, and oxygen levels spike higher than ever before. Snowball Earth was not just a catastrophe, it was a crucible. Life didn't merely endure, it was forged here, hammered into resilience like steel and fire. You pause, gazing at the endless frozen plain. It's quiet now, too quiet. But beneath your feet, unseen, are whispers of algae, fungi-like organisms, maybe even early animals, waiting. The stage is set. The cold nearly killed the symphony, but instead, it gave the instruments time to tune. When the ice melts, the music will roar back louder than ever. The ice has retreated, and the world feels restless. You can sense it in the water lapping at your feet, warmer now, richer in oxygen, brimming with hidden energy. The silence of Snowball Earth is gone. In its place, a low murmur grows, a biological buzz like an orchestra warming up. And then, without warning, the curtain rises. Welcome to the Cambrian explosion. You peer into the shallow seas, and it's as though someone turned the saturation dial all the way up. Creatures of every shape, size, and strategy are suddenly everywhere, crowding the oceans with an exuberance that borders on chaos. There are spiny trilobites scuttling like armored Roombas, their compound eyes glinting. Worms bore into the mud, wriggling like animated shoelaces. Jellyfish-like forms drift lazily, while bizarre shrimp with spiked claws dart like underwater drones. And then there's Anomalocaris, the stuff of nightmares, gliding like a stealth fighter, armed with grasping appendages and a toothy, circular mouth that looks uncomfortably like a blender. It's dazzling, it's terrifying, it's hilarious. Evolution has gone from slow jazz to heavy metal in the span of a geological heartbeat. What triggered this sudden burst? That's the million-year-old question. Some blame the oxygen boost from post-snowball Earth thawing. Others point to the rise of predation. Once creatures started eating each other, innovation went into overdrive. Still others suggest genetics, the appearance of Hox genes, those molecular architects that allow bodies to build with greater complexity. The truth? Probably a messy cocktail of all three. And yet, the Cambrian seas are not just about bodies. They're about strategies. Armor, speed, camouflage, spines, eyes. Yes, eyes. For the first time, evolution gifts creatures with sight, and suddenly the arms race is on. You can almost hear the soundtrack, dramatic chase music playing as predator and prey invent, counter-invent, and reinvent. You laugh quietly. It feels like nature's version of a startup boom. Everyone's trying something new. Some ideas flop, others dominate. Imagine a biological version of Shark Tank, except the sharks are real, and if your pitch fails, you get eaten. Of course, the fossil record is tricky. These creatures were soft-bodied, fragile. Many left only faint impressions in mudstone, ghostly outlines pressed like ancient Polaroids. Paleontologists still argue whether the Cambrian was truly an explosion, or if the record is just biased, with earlier complexity erased by time. But whatever the nuance, standing here, staring into these alien seas, you feel the pulse of novelty. And here's the wildest thing. Almost every major body plan you know today, arthropods, mollusks, chordates, traces back to this frenzy. The basic blueprints of crabs, snails, fish, and even you were all scribbled here in this burst of evolutionary graffiti. You watch as a trilobite scurries past, vanishing under a rock. A shadow looms above. It's Anomalocaris again, swooping down with those clawed appendages. The trilobite barely escapes, leaving you with your heart racing, even though you're only a bystander. The Cambrian is messy, brutal, dazzling, and short-lived. But the echoes of this explosion ripple forward through time, shaping every creature that will ever crawl, swim, or walk, including you. For now, you sink into the seabed sand, gazing up at a kaleidoscope of life swirling overhead. It feels like fireworks underwater, chaotic bursts of color and form, lighting up a dark ocean with sudden possibility. The age of experimentation has begun. The fireworks of the Cambrian have quieted a little, though the afterglow still shimmers in the water around you. Life, once a patchwork of lonely cells and cautious colonies, now builds ecosystems, places where creatures live not just side by side, but tangled in networks of dependence, rivalry, and chance. You wade into a reef, but not the kind you know today. There are no corals yet. Instead, vast sponge-like organisms dominate, their porous bodies filtering seawater with the patience of monks. Around them, soft-bodied worms weave tunnels through the sediment, aerating the sea floor. Small trilobites scuttle across these highways, grazing on microbial mats like goats on alpine meadows. And above, in the open water, swimmers and drifters glide, their bodies transparent, delicate, and ephemeral. This is no longer just an explosion of forms. It's a society. You notice how each role reinforces another. Worm burrows mix oxygen into sediments, letting microbes flourish. Filter feeders clear the water, allowing light to penetrate deeper, which in turn nourishes photosynthetic algae. Predators keep grazers in check, preventing them from stripping the seafloor bare. The balance is fragile but beautiful, like the first draft of an ecological novel. You chuckle softly. Imagine if you dropped your modern aquarium fish into this sea. They'd probably look around in confusion, muttering, "Where's the coral? Where's the kelp? Why does that shrimp have eyes on stalks bigger than its body?" And yet, despite the strangeness, you'd recognize the rhythm. Eat and be eaten, shelter and risk, cooperation and sabotage. The script of life is already here. And yet, the record is fuzzy. Fossils are frustratingly rare, leaving paleontologists to squabble over scraps. Was that delicate impression in shale an early jellyfish, or just a collapsed blob of microbial goo? Did sponges rule the reefs, or were they minor players in a microbial stage show? The debates are endless, and the rocks rarely settle the score. Still, one truth is clear. Life is now interlocking, interdependent. For the first time, creatures are not just surviving, they are building worlds together. You lean closer to a sponge, watching as water flows steadily through its chambers. You think about cities, how plumbing keeps them alive, how waste must move, how circulation matters. And suddenly it strikes you. This sponge is a city, a pulsing metropolis of cells, each playing its role, each contributing to the whole. Beneath your feet, worm burrows snake like subway tunnels. Above, swarms of plankton drift like commuters in slow motion. Even predators, lurking in shadows, are part of the system, agents of pressure, keeping populations in check. It's strangely comforting. From this messy web, patterns emerge. Ecosystems are fragile, but they are also resilient. They bend, shift, and reform after catastrophe. Already, Earth is rehearsing the great drama of balance and collapse, order and chaos that will play out for billions of years to come. You exhale, sinking deeper into the quiet rhythm of this ancient reef. For a moment, you almost forget how alien it is. It feels familiar, like déjà vu, and maybe that's the point. The ocean here is not just full of creatures, it's full of relationships. And relationships, whether between trilobite and worm, sponge and current, or you and me, are what make a world worth inhabiting. You step forward, and the reef you just knew dissolves into something larger, stranger, and louder. The Ordovician seas have taken over, and they are nothing short of spectacular. The quiet sponge cities of the Cambrian have blossomed into sprawling underwater metropolises, bustling with new residents. If the Cambrian was a fireworks show, the Ordovician is a full symphony, swelling and layered, each section playing louder than the last. Towering reefs rise like underwater skyscrapers. But now, corals, true corals, have joined the blueprint, stitching their skeletons into massive structures that could rival cathedrals. Bryozoans, those colonial architects, lace the gaps with delicate lattices. Together, they build habitats for thousands of tenants, from tiny filter feeders to predators with jaws like bear traps. And swimming between these towers, you see something that makes your heart jump: cephalopods. Not the playful octopuses you know today, but long, armored nautiloid giants, some stretching over 6 meters, cruising like living submarines. Their conical shells glint faintly as they glide, siphons pumping with perfect rhythm. They are the undisputed lords of the Ordovician seas, and if you squint, you can imagine a future where their descendants will shape myths of krakens and sea monsters. Around your ankles, trilobites still scurry, now in even greater diversity. Some streamlined like race cars, others spiny as if hedgehogs had learned to swim. Graptolites float in delicate chains, their bodies like inky calligraphy drawn across the water. Above, schools of jawless fish, armored in bony plates, shimmer like moving silver shields. The whole scene feels oddly modern, like a rehearsal for the ecosystems you'd recognize today. Food webs are denser, roles more defined, predators more cunning. This is no longer the chaotic experimentation of the Cambrian. This is a structured world. And yet, beauty comes with tension. As you watch a nautiloid spear a hapless trilobite with its tentacles, you realize the arms race hasn't slowed. It's escalated. Defensive spines grow longer. Armor thickens. Speed becomes essential. To live here is to adapt constantly, or vanish. Scientists debate what exactly fueled this Ordovician boom. Was it the steady rise of oxygen, finally stabilizing after snowball Earth's upheavals? Was it the spread of shallow seas, offering vast new habitats like endless playgrounds for evolution? Or was it sheer ecological momentum, the domino effect of life feeding on life until diversity itself became unstoppable? The rocks are silent, but the fossils hint at answers, etched like puzzle pieces waiting to be fit together. You hover in the reef's shadows, listening. The hum of this ancient sea is intoxicating. Steady currents, shells scraping, predators whooshing by like torpedoes. And then, in the distance, you see it. A massive cephalopod shell tilting as it dives, its tentacles unfurling like banners in battle. For a moment, the Ordovician Ocean feels like a stage, and you're watching the first blockbuster action sequence in history. Still, beneath the spectacle, you sense fragility. Ecosystems this rich are always balanced on a knife's edge. Storms, volcanoes, shifting continents, all could unravel it in an instant. But for now, the sea is alive, dazzling, and utterly sure of itself. You take one last breath of the salt, heavy air. The world feels young, exuberant, unstoppable. But you know what's coming. Earth has a way of reminding its creations that joy never lasts forever. The Ordovician seas are already magnificent, but now they take a bold step further. What you're witnessing isn't just life expanding, it's life exploding into diversity. A second great evolutionary surge, often called the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event. Picture reefs so vast they stretch like continents beneath the waves, crammed with creatures and shapes no artist could invent fast enough. Trilobites branch into countless varieties, some with delicate feathery spines, others squat and armored, still others with eyes perched high on stalks like periscopes. Bryozoans weave lace-like colonies across the sea floor, while corals sculpt intricate towers, turning shallow waters into dazzling, labyrinthine gardens. And then, the cephalopods. Oh, the cephalopods. Their conical shells gleam like ivory missiles, some long and straight, others curled into elegant spirals. They stalk these waters as apex predators, hunting with unblinking eyes and arms that seem far too clever for this early world. You watch one snatch a passing jawless fish, its tentacles tightening in a slow, deliberate embrace, and you realize you're staring at intelligence in its infancy. It isn't just predators that change. Plankton too diversify in wild abundance. Tiny floating organisms that quietly shape everything. Their proliferation fuels the entire food web, like invisible sparks keeping the grand engine of the oceans roaring. Without them, the trilobites, corals, and cephalopods would starve. And yet, in the fossil record, they leave only the faintest whispers, microscopic shells hidden in stone. The scale of life now feels overwhelming. You can almost hear the reef humming with activity. Trilobites scraping microbial mats, graptolites drifting like ribbons, gastropods spiraling over rocks, nautiloids sweeping by like ancient submarines. The seafloor is a crowded city, and everyone has a role, whether predator, prey, filterer, or scavenger. Of course, paleontologists argue over just how sudden this biodiversification was. Was it truly an event, a sudden leap, or did it unfurl gradually, hidden in fossil gaps? Some even question whether we've underestimated earlier diversity, erased by poor preservation. But standing here, surrounded by this carnival of form and function, it feels explosive, undeniable, almost exuberant. You grin. This is Earth in one of its happiest moods, warm, flooded with shallow seas, teeming with possibility. The world seems unstoppable, an endless rising tide of life. And yet, you know better. You know Earth never lets joy run unchecked for long. Somewhere, in distant cycles of climate and tectonics, the seeds of catastrophe are already sown. But you push that thought away for now. You tilt your head back and take it all in. The swarming trilobites, the spiraling corals, the cephalopod giants patrolling like kings. This is life at its most abundant, its most confident, its most glorious. The ocean has never looked more alive. The seas are alive, roaring with abundance. Trilobites scuttle across reefs as nautiloid cephalopods cruise like armored dreadnoughts. Coral towers bristle with life, while plankton bloom in such numbers they paint the water green. You stand amid this richness, and it feels eternal, like nothing could ever dim such a spectacle. But Earth has a habit of pulling the rug out just when things look most secure. The change begins quietly. Temperatures dip. Glaciers creep across the southern supercontinent Gondwana, their frozen fingers stretching farther than seems possible. At first, it feels like just another swing of climate. The ocean currents shift, the chemistry adjusts, life shrugs and carries on. But then the ice keeps advancing, and advancing, and advancing. The seas begin to drain as water locks into glaciers. Shallow marine habitats, the beating heart of Ordovician diversity, shrink and vanish. Coral reefs suffocate in the chill, bryozoan cities crumble, and trilobites scurry desperately for dwindling space. Predators like the mighty nautiloids suddenly find themselves kings without kingdoms. You walk across an exposed seafloor where once vibrant reefs stood. Now it's bare mud, cracked and drying under an unforgiving sky. Shells lie scattered, empty. The silence is unsettling, like walking through an abandoned amusement park. And yet, this isn't even the end. When glaciers finally retreat, melting ice floods the oceans, drowning lowlands, disrupting chemistry, and delivering a second punch. Oxygen levels plummet in places, suffocating survivors who manage to cling through the first freeze. It's as though Earth decided one blow wasn't enough. It had to make sure the message was clear. By the time it's over, perhaps 85% of marine species are gone. The world that once teemed with trilobites, corals, and cephalopod empires lies shattered. The great Ordovician biodiversification, so recently triumphant, now feels like a cruel setup for tragedy. Paleontologists still debate the finer points. Did cooling alone drive this extinction? Or did ocean anoxia play the larger role? Were tectonic shifts to blame, rearranging continents and currents beyond repair? The evidence lies scattered in rocks, isotopes, and fossils, sparking arguments that may never resolve. You kneel, brushing sand from a trilobite's imprint, perfectly preserved in stone. It looks peaceful, almost asleep, unaware that its world was ending. You sigh softly, realizing how fragile abundance can be. Still, extinction isn't only an ending, it's also a reset button. Space is cleared, niches emptied, opportunities opened. Evolution, ruthless and creative, will not let this emptiness last. But tonight, the seas feel hollow. The laughter of biodiversity has been muted, replaced by the solemn hush of survival. The party is over, and the silence that follows is deafening. The silence after catastrophe is profound. The once roaring Ordovician seas now lie subdued, their grandeur muted, their reefs reduced to rubble. What was once a symphony of life has dwindled to a faint, uncertain melody. Yet, in that quiet, something stirs. Extinction, brutal though it may be, is never the end. It is a reshuffling of the deck. The niches vacated by trilobites, corals, and cephalopod, lords do not remain empty forever. Slowly, hesitantly, new actors step forward. The Silurian dawns, the ice recedes, and with it comes the return of shallow seas. The sun warms muddy coasts, and algae bloom again, tinting the waters green. Coral reefs, once shattered, begin their long process of rebuilding, laying down fragile frameworks that promise future splendor. Eurypterids, sea scorpions, emerge as formidable predators, prowling lagoons with spiny claws, ready to seize anything careless enough to cross their path. Some grow to astonishing sizes, armored nightmares in shallow water. But the greatest changes are happening in places easy to overlook. On the seabed, jawless fish adapt, evolving protective bony plates that turn them into armored swimmers. Their forms are primitive, awkward perhaps, but you can sense where this path is leading. The blueprint of the vertebrate body, backbones, jaws, and eventually land-walking limbs, is being drafted here in quiet persistence. And beyond the tides, on damp coastal soils, tiny green shoots break the surface. Liverworts, moss-like pioneers, creep across mudflats. They are humble, delicate, easily dismissed, yet they represent one of the boldest steps in Earth's history. The first plants daring to colonize land. Their roots, primitive though they are, begin to alter soil, trap sediments, and change the air itself by releasing more oxygen. You crouch close to examine one of these fragile patches. It's almost laughable, so small, so unassuming. But this is how revolutions begin. Not with explosions, but with whispers. These plants will one day pave the way for forests, for food webs that span continents, for ecosystems that can support creatures far larger than anything alive today. Still, the scars of extinction remain. Diversity is not yet what it once was, and ecosystems feel thin, fragile, always on the brink of collapse. But life has a way of refusing to surrender. Step by step, form by form, it rebuilds. Looking out across these new seas, you can sense the rhythm of Earth's story. Abundance, collapse, recovery, renewal. Each cycle brings both loss and possibility. Each silence is followed by a new kind of song. And though the Ordovician's grandeur is gone, the Silurian hums with potential. It is quieter, yes, but in that quiet lies resilience, patience, and the first whispers of futures unimaginable. The shoreline is no longer just a blur of damp moss and scattered algae. You notice the ground firming, the air richer, and the horizon lined with something unfamiliar. The first forests. Not forests in the sense you know them, no towering oaks or rustling pines, but strange alien groves of spore-bearing plants called Cooksonia and Salophyton. Their stems rise a meter or two into the air, branching like delicate antennae, their tips releasing spores that drift on the breeze like invisible pollen. You brush your hand across one and laugh at the thought. You are standing at the edge of Earth's first woodlands. The Silurian world is transforming, and by the Devonian, the pace quickens. Roots dig deeper, breaking rock into soil. Rivers run muddier, carrying nutrients into seas, fueling blooms of life offshore. Oxygen levels climb steadily, and you feel it in your lungs, a freshness, a crispness that was once absent. For animals, this is a golden invitation. Fish begin to evolve jaws, a simple innovation that changes everything. Suddenly, instead of straining tiny plankton, predators can bite, grip, and chew. Placoderms, armored fish, emerge, some the size of buses, their steel-like jaws snapping through prey. You imagine one gliding beneath you, a moving fortress in the water, and you can't help but grin at the absurdity of how terrifying dinnertime just became. Meanwhile, in shallow pools near the coasts, small lobe-finned fish and lungfish experiment with something radical. Gulping air. Their fins, muscular and sturdy, begin to push against mud, testing the strange firmness of land. You picture one flopping awkwardly like someone trying yoga for the first time. Embarrassing, yet groundbreaking. These pioneers do not yet know it, but their descendants will stride across continents, eventually becoming everything from dinosaurs to you. Back on land, the plants grow bolder. By the late Devonian, tree-like lycopsids and ferns rise higher, shading the ground. Entire landscapes turn green, casting shadows where once there was only barren rock. The air hums with insects, among the first to take flight. Imagine dragonflies the size of hawks, wings shimmering in sunlight. Proof that oxygen is climbing, enabling bodies to grow large, wings to beat strong. But Earth is never content with stability for long. The Devonian, too, has its dark turns. Coral reefs, now vast and complex, collapse in a series of extinctions. Fish diversity surges, then falters. Some scientists argue it was climate. Others suspect plants themselves, by altering soil and water chemistry, unintentionally triggered cascades of ecological crises. The debates remain, sharp as ever, in the halls of paleontology. And yet, through all this, the trajectory is clear. Life is not just recovering anymore, it is conquering. The cyanobacteria of ancient seas could never have imagined this outcome when they first belched oxygen into a hostile world. That invisible trickle of gas now fuels forests, dragonflies, armored fish, and the first tentative steps onto dry land. You sit at the edge of a Devonian riverbank, listening to the soft hiss of spores releasing. the distant splash of a lungfish breaking the surface. The forest canopy above you filters the light into green gold beams. The world has grown lush, layered, intricate. The silence after extinction has given way to a symphony, different from the Ordovician's reefs, but richer in promise. The cycle is undeniable: catastrophe, renewal, growth. Earth breathes through these rhythms, and you are caught in its exhale. You smile because you know the story doesn't end here. Dinosaurs will come, mammals will scamper, humans will wonder. But tonight, you linger in this green alien Devonian twilight, grateful for the stubborn persistence of life. So close your eyes now. Let the rustle of those first forests drift around you like a lullaby. Let the dragonflies trace soft arcs through your imagination. The world is safe here, for now. The oxygen is sweet, the air full of promise. And as the vision fades, you hear only a whisper,